Excellent. Well, thank you very much, everybody. As mentioned, we now have John Bundy, UK Commercial Director at Sage+Archer Vistar Media. John's session title for today is Data-Driven Creativity in Digital Out of Home. John, I'd like to welcome you to the stage. Please give John a round of applause. Thank you.
Right, so as you know, I'm not Diederick, just to make it absolutely clear, but I'm going to do my best imitation of a tall Dutchman. So thank you all for coming here. What I wanted to do today was to give you a brief overview of how we use data to drive creativity in that digital out of home. And like Gordon's presentation just now, there might be a hint of sales in it, but I will try to make it look less salesy than my deck looks. So there we go. Anyway, we are out-of-home DSP. We work with media owners across Europe, and in fact, right across the world now, as part of Vistar Media. So basically, we enable media, anyone to basically buy digital out-of-home in almost any country you can imagine. Well, certainly a large chunk of it, particularly in the United States, but also more and more across Europe, Australia, South America, etc. But what's really interesting is in all those places, we're seeing a real appetite for delivering ads that are a bit more creative, rather than just putting a poster up, actually thinking a bit more about context, about location. And what I want to talk about today is a little bit about the importance of location and context in out of home, and how we can use that to be more creative and more imaginative in what we bring to these masses and masses of screens. Before I do that, it's a lovely picture of, well, 4 of us are on the stage over at our beach hut by the Brick Lane beach. Diederick won't be there, but that's only because there's pretty much every flight out of Amsterdam has been cancelled today, apparently. Anyway, there we go. So, the cliche about out-of-home, and this is, you wouldn't have a digital out-of-home presentation if you didn't mention this, is the old Minority Report scenario of basically walking through and everything is customized to you. Now, yeah, that's 20 years old now, and it's a little bit of a sort of cliche that, oh God, everyone's monitoring us. And it wasn't really a dig at out-of-home, it was more a dig at advertising in general. And arguably, yes, we saw a lot of that happen in online digital display. But actually what's been really interesting, particularly in Europe over the last five years or so, is we've seen obviously GDPR come in, and we are moving away from the idea of targeting the individual to targeting groups based on context and where they are, what kind of group they're in, what sort of cohort they're in, and how you can reach that group of people individually well. And that's exactly what Gordon was mentioning earlier, that Sukarno are doing, and you can use data. You can actually understand what people do and how those audiences work. And we've done it. We have done stuff that is a little bit targeting the individual. So we did this thing with a Dutch startup bank with an interesting name, KNAB, which is obviously, interesting little attempt to reverse banking. But basically what they wanted to do, they had just sort of very rapidly grown, and they'd got a host of customers, and they wanted to basically thank their first sort of 50,000 customers by delivering to them customized ads. So they asked their permission and said, look, we will put up an ad nearest to your house with your name on it. We'll celebrate you. Just tell us who you are and say you want it, and then we'll put it out for you. And we ran that for us. And this, you can see, Jan Wilhelm got an ad with NAB saying how much they loved him. We did this about 10,000 different variations of this particular ad for about 10,000 or so different Dutch consumers, all personalized to the nearest screen to their location. And we told them when it would run. And the beauty of running things pragmatically and dynamically is that you can control things. You can deliver stuff that is based on time and place, and you can make it remarkably accurate. And that's a huge, huge step forward. But on a more prosaic level, you can do some really interesting things just without having to go down to putting your name on a screen. So context is absolutely everything. But context works best when you add scale to it as well. So for us, we work with all the media owners. So again, this is a little bit salesy. But yeah, about 15,000 screens across the UK, all major media owners. And you can simply you can reach those billboards you see on a bus stop, or the big ones you see by the roadside and on the tube or wherever you like. Even thanks to Global, they've now got those fantastic ribbons you see on the escalators. Those are all available on these platforms. So you can do all kinds of cool things with these amazing screens. But when you add creative into it and you can be more dynamic about it, it makes it really interesting. So what we do is we take that ad, but we make it customizable. So the ad is served just as you serve an ad to a web page. The ad is customized on delivery. So, for example, it'll be delivered. This example takes various different triggers, various different data sources. So we've got people like Magento and AdSquare and others who deliver data into the platform, and they tell us, things about audiences. We use triggers such as weather data or anything that gives time of day and location. So it could be UV index, it could be football scores, it could be, you name it. It could be footfall in a store. And then we add that to change the parameters. So location might change the parameter, the weather condition might change the parameter, and then it changes the ad that you see on the screen. And that happens in the time of the ad being delivered. So here are a few examples of things that have been done across the UK and Europe with us that kind of give you a bit of a taste of what can be done in this platform. So here we go. I think we mentioned Bolognese earlier on, but here we go, a pasta brand, and they wanted to get a very simple campaign just targeting getting sales happening in supermarkets. So we targeted it at rush hour, so from 4 p.m. till midnight, coming off the weekend, when people go on their way home, wanted to get supper sorted out. And we targeted it within a mile or so radius of all major supermarkets across the Netherlands. But also, we also put in the location and the details of the supermarket where it was being sold, so you knew where to go. Really, really simple. Once you put a bit of personalization, even just the name of recognizing where it is, it gets people's attention. A mobile brand. These guys wanted to launch a product in market. They were directly competing with Apple, so their way to do it was to reach across 39 cities, but within a 1 kilometer radius of every Apple store. So every screen within the 1 kilometer radius of the Apple store, we ran this ad. But the beauty of it was, because they were coming from trying to buy across multi-region, they were able to buy across 8 different markets, 39 cities, all tied into the Apple stores, and only running around those particular stores. Really, really simple, but again, using location as a targeting metric. This one, the Rotterdam Marathon, targeting the marathon route for decathlon, tying in and with a countdown to when the marathon actually starts, and only along the marathon route and running up right to the marathon actually began. Moretti, we do a lot of work with Heineken. They're a fantastic client. But what we do with them tends to be, they love to do it dynamic. So this was around their sponsorship of the North Sea Jazz Festival, a big annual event in the Netherlands. And we, again, count down to the event along the festival route and where they know the audiences from the festival are. But we also wanted to make it actually happen during the day, so tying alongside the experience of customers in the day, of visitors to the festivals. We had the countdown, obviously, before, but then on the day of the festival, we had a welcome to the festival. And then on the way home, we had have a great trip home. Again, customized creative, dynamic, visual, with video that makes it stand out, but really, really simple and tied in directly with the customer. Another lovely example from Heineken, where we work with them. As you remember, we try to forget, but back in 21, when we were coming out of the COVID lockdowns, bars and restaurants really struggled. And Heineken, as a big brand, they wanted to support them. So their big thing was the countdown to when everyone came out of lockdown. And they wanted to encourage people to get back to the pub and take a picture of their first pint. So we ran this campaign, which was really simple. It basically said, you've only got so many days until your nearest bar opens, and take a picture of your first pint. So we had the countdown, day 3, day 2, day 1. We had go to your nearest bar. That was customized around, I think we supported around 1,000 or so different bars across major Dutch cities. And then when people got there, we encouraged them to take Instagram pictures of their first pint, to celebrate their first pint back in the pub after lockdown, and then upload it. And these were then independently moderated and set onto the nearest screen to that bar. So you saw people basically going out and just being really happy to get back to the pub, which makes sense. And then you talk about triggers. So you've got triggers that I mentioned earlier. The ideas of using weather as a trigger. This is a really good example. So Luxaflex, they make blinds and mosquito nets. So it's an interesting example, but basically we tied this in with when it was hot and muggy and we knew mosquitoes were out, we ran their mosquito ad. When the sun was shining, we ran their summer blinds ad. It was a really simple bit of differentiation, but they could simply upload one creative and two creatives into one campaign. It would simply moderate between the two on the fly. Something we're doing a bit more with these guys. This is Gal & Gal, are a off-license brand. And they are really interested in getting using weather forecasts rather than real-time weather data. They actually wanted to say what the weather's going to be that weekend. So it's coming up. If it's going to be a lovely sunny weekend, we'd serve a different ad to if it's going to be a bit gloomy, or if it's barbecue weather, or if it's staying indoors having a glass of red wine weather. Again, you can see here, you had two different contexts. So when the weather was fabulous, everyone in the Netherlands were out drinking boxes of white wine. A bit cooler, everyone likes the rosé. This is based on their own legacy data of what they sell. So it just worked really nicely. And because we were not running according to the weather at that time, but about the weather that it was going to come up for that weekend, it gave people a little bit of a sort of, you know, it's going to be sunny, go out and get a box of red wine and drink it in the park and fall over. Speaking of totally different things, but if you look at this one, we targeted this consumers in Denmark. This was for a meditation app, and they basically wanted to reach people when they were at their most stressed and most generally struggling with the day. So we used Google footfall data, real-time Google footfall data, to target station inventory at the busiest moments of the day. So when it was, you know, the station was absolutely jam-packed and people were sort of squeezing through it, we served this nice sort of calm down, everything's going to be all right, don't panic. And then obviously that was a really, really nice, simple tie-in with a piece of real-time data that you wouldn't necessarily immediately think of as a cue for advertising. Another lovely example is when I mentioned we can use external feeds from general public feeds, but also you can use first-party data. So in this case, we work with several museums in the Netherlands on this, where we use live sales data to trigger ads. So this is based on when customers are, when footfall in particular museums drops below a certain point, when their ticket sales drop below a certain point, it activates the ad. So if things are a bit quiet, the ad comes out. And it just sits there, always on. They don't rebook it. It's been on, I think, for now 18 months or so. And it just activates automatically when footfall is below a certain level. And it's a really, really simple, really effective way of using advertising only when you actually need it. Similarly, these guys do hearing aids, and they have shops all over the Netherlands, and this is based on their own scheduling app. So when the people book hearing aid appointments, and when their calendars are slim, they run this ad saying we've got availability. And when things are busy, they don't. And it's really, really simple, but it's really effective. And it doesn't require a huge amount of work because it's simply tying in with their existing data. So we can do this with all sorts of things. We can do it with stock levels. We can do ads that moderate creative according to what you may have, what you may be selling that day, what the weather may be. All sorts of things can act as triggers. And then you go on to things like audience targeting. Now, one of the things that's really interesting about out-of-home, and I mentioned earlier the sort of way we've targeted audiences in programmatic in other platforms, it's always been about targeting the individual. In out-of-home, and just like CTV to a certain extent and other platforms, we're talking about targeting groups according to location, according to what we know about what that audience is doing at that particular time of day, at that particular area. So where can I reach audiences of, say, young mothers, or where can I reach audiences of 20-somethings who want to go into the pub? What time should I reach them? So we work with partners who provide us data that allow us to do this. A really good example of this is a campaign which wanted to target students and a younger audience, and the obvious thing would have been to go and run it just around the universities and around educational establishments and just keep it simple. What we did was actually, we looked at the data sets we had. We knew that at 9 o'clock in the morning, they were going to be in certain spots, and then in the evening, there were going to be different areas. So it's not complicated. This isn't rocket science. It's nothing massively difficult about this. But what it does is it just means that we deliver ads to the audiences that you want when you need them, rather than messing about and just having something on, always on, and it's going to be with a fair degree of wastage. So that's the simplicity of it. And that's the really, really important thing about adding data to how you buy out of home, because once you start doing that, you can make the creative more relevant, make it more interesting. You can buy when and where your audience is, rather than just chucking an ad up and hoping the best. And that's the most important thing I want you to get out of this, is that we can do much more interesting things when we start thinking about using data, not just in the creative itself, but in the way that we buy. So just a brief touch, see some of the data sources we work with. And we've seen that grow. We also just started, and this is one last thing I wanted to plug. We've also working with Samba, so we're also tying it in with TV data. So we can target audiences we can run alongside the TV data, TV audiences, where we basically will essentially augment what you're doing with the TV campaign. So areas where your TV campaign might be weak, or when your TV campaign is strong, we can basically add and boost, or however you want to do it with that. And we can equally look at that, so we can look at areas, we can look at understanding how people watch TV, whether they're playing video games, we can target areas where that audience is. And so we can do some really interesting things when you start crossing over with different data sources. But Samba's just one example. There's a whole host of other partners where you can use interesting data and tie it into how you buy digital out of home. So that's it, really. There's loads to talk about with this, but for the moment, I just wanted to touch on that subject. I hope it wasn't too salesy. We have a bit of a stash of Stroop Ruffles and beach bags over at C12, which is, so if you get over there, there even is a bit of booze in the beach bags. There's no booze in the Stroop Ruffles, that'd be weird. But, so please pop by, grab a Stroop Ruffle or a beach bag while they last, and hopefully see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. As ever, content was perfect and very beautifully, eloquently delivered. Thank you very much.